What's going on, guys? So this is the first video on the channel. Welcome. And it's a bit of a bad one for me, unfortunately. So about a year and a half ago, I took the plunge to buy the Razer Phone 2. It had some nice features. It had Dolby Atmos built into the phone. The audio quality was impeccable. The cameras, they don't stack up to what you get nowadays, but it was more than enough for what I was using it for at the time. And to begin with, I loved the phone, completely loved it. You had the RGB lights on the back, which turned out if you leave them on, you basically have a black hole for a battery. And everything went fine for the first almost a year. I didn't really have any issues. I had a couple of gripes, but for doing like gaming on it, it was perfect. You pick it up, you play games, it looks buttery smooth, everything looks so vivid. And then it started going downhill. It's got to a point now where obviously this phone's been replaced. I now have the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, which is 10 times better than this phone ever was. But it's got to a point where this phone is basically dead already. I mean, it still works. You can still use the phone. But the first thing to happen was the fingerprint scanner decided it no longer wanted to live. So we're now at a point where this phone has a fingerprint scanner and the software doesn't pick up that even has a fingerprint scanner, which basically just means I have a power button, this glass, and nothing else works with that power button. So it has to start switching over to using pins and safety zones to automatically lock the phone so I didn't have to keep typing in a pin. And then it got worse. The phones wouldn't always charge when I plugged it in. I've tried different leads, tried different charging plugs, and I ended up the only way being able to fully charge it all of the time guaranteed was to use a wireless charger. And I didn't have a very good wireless charger. So this phone was taking me about 3 hours to charge, which if you do need to go out, like I was working at the time, you need to go out and you can't just plug your phone in for an hour and have a good amount of charge. I could put it on that wireless charger for that hour and only have about 20% of my battery, which really started to impact me. I couldn't listen to music when I was on the move. I basically had to just turn the whole phone off until I got to where I was going. And then if I needed to come back, I'd turn it off once I'd used it there for whatever I need to use it for, be it a bus ticket or whatever, and then have to turn it off and turn it back on my way back just so I could use said bus ticket. And I went on with it for a few months because I still loved the phone dearly. But the Razer Phone 2 had another surprise coming for me. It started off quite small. At first, I didn't really notice it wasn't a major issue. It started to have screen burn. And to begin with, it was just the tiniest of yellow strips on the side. I mean, it was no more than a centimetre. It was noticeable, you could see it, but it didn't impact me much. I could still use the phone, and most of the time, you stare at the phone, you ignore it completely. Whilst if you're on a web browser, you have a white background, you can see that a lot more. When I was watching videos, I didn't really see it. That was until about 4 months ago, and I finally decided enough was enough. I was going to replace the phone because I now have yellow bars down both edges of the phone. And it just keeps getting worse and worse. And obviously with the charging issues, the fingerprint scanner issues. Now, I'm not saying the Razer's a bad company. They've made some amazing products. I just don't think this phone has done very good. Now, it wasn't a huge seller from my understanding at the time. A lot more people say more mainstream phones. But being from a gaming background and being a gamer, I wanted that gaming phone. And Razer make brilliant laptops, headsets, peripherals for your computers that are just at that next level. but this phone just wasn't that experience for me, and I regretted buying it shortly about a year later. And it just kept getting worse to the point, well, I said I had to replace it. I didn't know what was going to break next. I didn't know if the phone was actually going to last me the day, because the battery would be dead within half a day. I'd have to charge this phone up twice every single day just to be able to finish the day. And it just wasn't working for me anymore. I mean, the RGB lights on the back, which I used to love so much, got completely turned off. They don't work for notifications for me anymore. I just completely turned them off in the software. I do not want those draining the battery even more. And this carried on for a little while, and I kept thinking about it, because I did love the phone, but it just wasn't worth that risk for me. So now you've heard me on my backstory on why I've decided this phone just has to go. Now I was thinking, obviously I wanted to create this channel, I wanted to put a lot of tech related stuff on there. I thought, what a brilliant place to start with the fact that this is something I've had personal experience with, and I have seen other people talk about this exact issue. Now it may be a case that I just got, the bad lottery pick. This may just have been a faulty model, but unfortunately I don't have that sort of money where I can happily send this off and have another phone all ready for me to use whilst it's away. I needed to use my phone on a daily basis, so the reliability just wasn't there for me. And so I was thinking, how could we give this phone its send-off? Like I said, this phone has always been one of my favourites I've owned, because I've owned some really bad phones. I owned the Sony Xperia ZX Premium, I think it was, or the XZ Premium, and that phone, I loved it at first. The 4K camera, 4K screen, being able to finally actually see in 4K when you can film in 4K was such a big thing for me, because I didn't see the point of filming in 4K but not being able to watch it back in 4K. But then that phone had its own issues. You could only film in 4K for 5 minutes before it turned off. So this has been one of my favourite phones I've owned, but I regret buying it purely based on my experience, and I would not buy a future Razer phone purely because it just doesn't have that quality I really hoped. It feels nice, it's a decent size, the sound quality is amazing, but it doesn't have the reliability and the quality there for it to actually even last me a couple of years. When you think of most contracts you buy, if you guys phone on contract, would be 24 months. And this phone lasted me just over a year. So with just over a year, I was still locked into a contract at the time. I had to get another contract to replace this phone. And so the phone's dead. It's going to be swimming with the fishes. So we're going to go now into the bathroom, where I've prepared a steaming hot bath where it literally only has hot water in it. And this phone's going to go for a swim, and hopefully, it will be the one time it doesn't let me down and it does actually die.